Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and joining me, as always, is my co-host, Grapeviney. Good evening, Grapeviney.
Good evening, Demonland, and good evening to all the listeners out there. A very funny show that we've got teed up tonight, thanks to our special guest, Titus O'Reily. Social media superstar, so really looking forward to having Titus on.
Yeah, it is exciting. It was a good get. I thought, we wanted to sort of mix it up with the type of guests that we've had. We've had Mel Hickey, we've had Max Gorn, and I'm trying to get one of our coaching staff on, which I'm sure will happen soon. But wanted to sort of mix it up and get someone else, so I thought, can't go, if you don't ask, you don't get, so I thought I'd put it out there and ask Titus to come on, and he's agreed. So, he's a fellow demon tragic like the rest of us listening to this, so, be good to hear his take.
Is there any chance that Titus O'Reily and Demonland's resident comedian Dees are one and the same person? Have they been spotted in the same room together?
Well, I don't know. Everyone was sort of asking me, does Titus post on Demonland? And I don't know, maybe that's something we can ask him tonight. Maybe he doesn't want to show his hand. He might say Yep. He doesn't. He might just leave it to our imagination. So, that is beyond our control, but we can ask the question, certainly.
He might be stealing material from Demonland.
Well,
this could get ugly.
I like to accuse everyone of stealing material from Demonland. I think we've seen things appear on Demonland and then have appeared in one form or another in some type of media. So I'll take all the credit for that.
I did check with a journalist one day from the Herald Sun. I ran because there is a popular theory on Demonland that journos just sit on there all day and read every thread, which I don't believe to be the case. But I did check with a journo, and that person seemed to think that there would be some journos that would trawl through the supporter sites like Demonland, but I don't think they read through every post in every thread. It'd be impossible to do sort of the rest of the work that they do. So anyway, we could argue that one, I guess.
Well, I guess they're, if they're going to do that with Demonland, then they've probably got to do that with all the other fan sites that are out there. And, that seems to be a waste of time for a decorated journalist. You would think they might get the interns to sit on those ones.
That's true, although there are fewer and fewer interns and journalists at the papers these days, and you only need to look at today's Age, which had a little article about Angus Brayshaw and his concussion issues, and accompanied by a picture of Jack Watts. So that's the standard we get these days, unfortunately.
Well, you'd sort of expect that if they're sending the fact-checking offshore, which could be the case.
Well, unfortunately, it's all going offshore. We also got news this week that the Herald Sun has let go one of its best footy photographers, Wayne Ludby,
yep.
Who's been around the Cape for 20-plus years. He was a former picture editor at the Herald Sun, and also a Demon fan, is Wayne. Of course, he's also the brother-in-law to the late, great Jimmy Steins.
Okay.
His sister is Sam Steins,
okay.
Formerly Sam Ludby. So just another little demon tidbit there. But, it's a shame that he's a great photographer, Wayne Ludby. It's a shame that we won't see... for the moment, we're not going to see his work anymore. I'm sure he'll get another gig somewhere in the industry.
So who's taken his job? Like some kid with an iPhone?
Yes, yeah. I mean, probably some of our listeners follow Wayne on Instagram or Twitter, and he's done quite a few Melbourne games already this year, and his pictures are just superb. So, a bit of a shame the way these things are going in the modern media landscape.
Yeah, that is a shame. And in a few minutes, we'll take a quick break and bring Titus, our guest, on. But just before we get there, we might just have a brief chat about the extra man or men that our opposition had on the weekend. Now I don't like to ever excuse any losses on bad umpiring or bad decisions, but it almost seemed like the opposition had an extra man on the field, and it was noted that on Demonland during the week that the free kick stats that North got on the weekend was akin to their third or fourth most highest possession getter on the weekend.
Well, yeah, I think it was 22-10, I think was the final count. Which is very lopsided. Look, it does happen occasionally, and we've had games where we get the rub of the green. We certainly didn't get it on the weekend, and there were, you could point to half a dozen instances where, we were basically crucified. There's been a big thread about the decision against Christian Salem in the last quarter, which was just inexplicable. In front of the members, on the members' wing there.
It was right in front of us.
And there was the deliberate out of bounds against Hibbert, which came off a North player.
Yes.
And then, of course, there was the inability of the umpires to control the game really from the outset. And had they nipped that in the bud early, the game would have been different. It wouldn't have had that spite, and Christian Salem probably wouldn't have committed the stupid act that he did eventually commit, and now we've lost him for a week.
Yeah.
Yet another suspension that we can't afford.
Yeah, and we'll probably talk more about that a little bit later. But for me, with the free kicks, it's not just the free kicks that you get against you. It's oftentimes it's the free kicks you don't get. And, in particular, the free kicks that they were getting, it wasn't being reciprocated when that sort of stuff was happening to us. And the thing that frustrates me the most is the free kicks that some of their, opposition teams' forwards get. That, Jesse just never gets any of those free kicks, and maybe it's because he sometimes plays for them. But, it was disappointing.
Question in the chat room, how do we think that the club should approach it? Maybe we can return to that question after we've had Titus on, because he's probably coming up in a moment, I think, isn't he?
Yeah, so I'm going to...
He's probably standing by.
Yeah, he is. Well, I've got to get him up on the old Skype in 1 second, so we might just whack some music on for a second while we bring him up. Unfortunately, we don't have a team of staff here. I should get my wife to be, our call screener. We don't have that, so we'll do it the manual way. So
she could do advertisements if we had sponsors. Yeah, she could sort of read out prepaid ads.
Yeah, I'll get my kids on that straight away. All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break. You can listen to the lovely sounds of Up There Kazali while we bring our guest on. Go for it.
Well, we're very lucky tonight to have as our special guest one of the funniest men in football. He's got tens of thousands of followers on his various social media accounts. He's got a regular gig in the Herald Sun and elsewhere. I'm speaking, of course, about Titus O'Reily. Welcome, Titus, to the Demonland podcast.
Oh, well, it's good to be with you, and the funniest man in football. It's a low bar in the football media to be funny, I've got to say.
Well, it got a bit lower, didn't it, just recently with the passing of Lou Richards, probably one of the original funny men in the game. So, one less competitor for you, I suppose.
Yeah, well, I think Lou was one of the first ones. He also led to basically every footy player getting a gig in the media these days, which hasn't always been for the best, really, has it?
No, I think we've all suffered on that front. Look, Titus, we've prepared a list of questions for you to try and tease out your very best material, and I'm just looking at that list now, and question one is, ask Titus to say something funny. Question 2 is ask Titus to say something else that's funny. And question 3 is a rabbi, a priest, and Alex Neil Bullen walk into a bar. What happens next?
Well, Alex probably get dropped, knowing the way he's going lately. And what's a funny thing I could say? I could probably say that the funniest thing I could say is Mark Neild is a wonderful coach.
I love it. Titus, can you give us a little background to the genesis of the Titus O'Reily character and your presence on social media? And also, does the 1920s Sydney gangster Herbert Ellis know that you've stolen his identity?
Well, the truth of it all was I didn't start with anything in mind, if that makes sense. I sort of just one day a few friends were starting a website and asked me if I'd contribute some stuff. And I set up a Twitter account and they said they all wanted to have fake names because they were working in certain jobs that they didn't want people to know what they were saying. And so they made me come up with one, not that it's fake, of course. And that's sort of how it happened. And I thought I'd do it for 2 weeks. So I started writing a couple of pieces and I wrote some blog pieces that were, funnily enough, serious pieces because I hadn't written for ever before. And no one read them at all. Not even, my parents read them. It was pretty, debilitating. And then I wrote one about the third time when I was about to give up on it. I wrote one about the constant fear of raising a Carlton supporter.
Yeah, that's my biggest fear.
Yeah, it's a huge fear to have. And although making your child a Melbourne supporter might be just as bad in some ways.
It's cruel.
Sort of signing your child up to a lifetime of misery. But so I started it, and that actually got a few people reading it. But even then it was small, and Twitter, it just started to build slowly. And I just enjoyed it. And most of it was just tweeting actually during Melbourne games, venting, because it just happened to coincide with, the Bailey/Neild years, the post-Danaher years that we all just been through and might still be in.
Humour got you through the Great Depression, as it's
That's
popularly
right.
called.
It just kept going, and then it sort of started as the numbers started to grow, which wasn't really my intention at first because they were all, these things start off pretty small. I just found I enjoyed it and enjoyed writing it, so I just kept doing the writing, and then slowly it just kept building, and then now I get to do it full time. So it's been a fun little thing that kind of came out of nowhere.
Did you get your inspiration at all? Had you sort of read? I don't know if you're familiar with the White Maggot, who ran a site for a couple of years. Again, sort of football satire. Had you sort of seen any of that material, or was it just sort of stuff that came from you? I suppose I'm asking whether you'd had any inspiration from, I don't know, the Coulda-Beans or others.
I didn't have any. I didn't know some of the sites that had been around. I hadn't read much at the time, and have since had people point them out to me. I think the thing I'd always liked, just comedy in general. There's a bit of a sports thing going back through. If you're, Andrew Denton, Roy and HG, the Coulda-Beans. Yep. El McFeast, going back into sort of the 80s, 90s, and even before, that I'd sort of always liked. But I actually was probably more, I've always been drawn to things like, The Onion and that sort of satirical stuff from the States that I'd always liked. I was a huge, at the time, and still like him, but I liked Bill Simmons for ESPN.
Yep.
Even though he's very different, he was the first guy I saw once I started doing this a bit that had built a media career from not going through the normal media channels, but actually just first writing a blog and just developing his own thing. And so that's sort of what kind of inspired me a bit.
So how much planning goes into your tweets? Like, is it spur of the moment stuff, or do you have a few pre-written gags ready to go?
It's all spur of the moment. I've never... I think about twice I've pre-written something and come up, and then what always happens is that, the joke doesn't work because, the equivalent of Richmond losing in the final seconds happens, or You know, you kind of get
I was going to
that.
say, surely you've got sort of pre-prepared Richmond material for the inevitable that we see each week.
Yeah, well, you sort of think that then. I've just never really done the pre stuff. It's always coming up on the time, and it's kind of weird because you're kind of coming up constantly. You know, I've been doing this for 6 years now, and you kind of think, you know, how many tweets can you make up about one league? You know, we're all making jokes about the same thing. So it is a strange kind of occupation we all have doing it, but they all are just spur of the moment. And then the thing with Twitter is some of them are good and some of them are just me venting and some of them are not very good. So but that's the nature of Twitter, you know, you do it and then it's out there and then it's gone. So that's sort of the way I look at it. But sometimes you have something just strike you and the strangest thing is with humour, and, you know, there's some people who don't find me funny at all and they let me know. But sometimes I think, well, that's a really good gag, and I tweet it and no one likes it. And then another time it will be a throwaway line and will go really well. So you never know what's actually going to work anyway.
What's the best tweet you've ever put out in your opinion?
Oh, trying to remember. So I don't remember a lot of them. This is my problem because I kind of do them and move on to the next. You know, you're always trying to come up with something else. But I'm trying to think I've had a few. I can't remember them all. One that I can remember about Melbourne that I liked was, I think when they sacked Neeld, I did something about Melbourne have sacked another coach. As always, remember it's a good sign, a good reminder to change your smoke alarm battery. Because there's that period where we would, you know, you remember what that was like. It was, you know, were we ever going to keep a coach, it seemed, for a while.
Yep.
Oh, we do know that. Are there any particular controversies that had you licking your lips? Like, I imagine the Essendon drug scandal, you know, was a goldmine of material. So any other controversies out there that you really enjoy?
The Essendon one was great, so much to the point where, and I hope that he doesn't mind me telling this story, but I actually caught up with Xavier Campbell once for a coffee, who's the CEO of Essendon, and he contacted me, and he just contacted to say he was a fan. He didn't want anything or tell me off or anything, which I was surprised, because when he contacted me and said we should catch up for a coffee, I thought he was going to tell me off for just bagging Essendon for about 4 years straight. But he did say, you can pay for the coffee because I've given you so much free material, which I thought was a good line. The Richmond stuff's always good. Richmond are just, you know, they're like the iron ore of kind of, you know, footy jokes. They're kind of, you know, they're the rock that it's built on.
Blue chip investment.
Yeah, that's right. They're the blue chip stock. I thought Freo were going to be good for jokes this year, but they've been terrible because they started to play well. I mean, Melbourne have had their fair share of craziness that have, you know, but that comes in from so much. So much though. I interviewed Nathan Jones for Channel 7, and they didn't put this on to air, but he was really nice. But when I went in, he said, "God, you've given us a hard time," and he said, "I think I unfollowed you at one point." And I laughed and said, "Oh, I think you followed me back. I didn't realise you had unfollowed me." And he goes, "No, I follow you again." And he said, "Oh, you've been harsh on us, though. You've been really harsh." And I said, "Oh, yeah, but you know, it's only because it's only because I care." And he goes, "Yeah, I know, mate. I felt that way too." So he was really funny about it. And I said to him, "Nathan, have you felt over the last 10 years like you've been trapped in the worst group assignment in the history of time?" And he said, "Yes."
On that note, have you ever sort of gotten in trouble for anything that you've tweeted, like where you've had sort of blowback from either a player or some other target of your tweets? You ever been told to tone it down, either from anyone?
No, I've never had anything. I mean, I assume there's got to be a few people who wouldn't like me. I mean, as in the people who I probably... The only person I ever know who's... So I think if anyone does have a problem with me, I've never bumped into them or they've never told me. But the only footballer I'm aware of to have blocked me is Alex Rance. Remember when Alex Rance punched or elbowed Jack Watts in the back of the head?
Yep.
We all remember that.
Yes.
And I tweeted something about, gutless and weak because it's like shooting Bambi. Jack Watts is a nice guy. You don't elbow him in the back of the head while he's lying prone on the ground. I mean, you shouldn't elbow anyone like that, but especially Jack. And so I tweeted in defence of Jack, and so Alex Rance blocked me. So, no big loss not being able to see Alex Rance's tweets. You'd be surprised to learn.
I've seen some of his material on the Footy Show, and I've got to agree with you on that front. He's a strange cat, isn't he?
I wondered who watched the Footy Show. It's you. Yeah. You're the audience.
Yeah, that's me.
Hi. Who am I doing this show with? So, Titus, how often do you get people who blatantly miss the satire of your posts or articles? Like those people who stumble upon and then rage share an onion story. Do you ever get gullible people, berating you, believing what you've written is true?
Yeah, I get a lot. It's one of my great joys to get people not understand it. But my they fall into two categories. So I either get people who think it's real and get angry with me or correct me and point out that I'm an idiot or something. So I did one when this was a soccer one, but when Australia qualified to go to Brazil World Cup, I said, finally my Spanish lessons pay off. And all these people corrected me that they speak Portuguese there, which is, of course, the whole point of it. The whole point was I was meant to be an idiot. But the worst thing is I get all these people who just go, you're an idiot, you're an ignorant bastard and all that. So I got all that. But the worst is the people who are fans and who contact me, they'll message me, so away from the public eye, and they'll say, oh, look, Titus, I saw your tweet saying you said Spanish. It's actually Portuguese there. And they'll be doing it in a nice way, not in a you're an idiot way. And then I feel better. Then I do feel a bit bad.
So do you read through all the responses and all the private messages and the rest of it, do you? I would have thought there'd be too much to get through it all.
I read all the DM. Like if someone DMs me, I'll read it, or emails me, I'll always read those. I pretty much can read most stuff. On Twitter, I can read most stuff. On Facebook, it's got to the point where, on a few posts, not all, but on a few, I get like 200 to 600 comments.
Wow.
And so sometimes I'll flick through them, and other times you just don't get time, or depends what mood I'm in or how much work I've got to do. But yeah, so sometimes I will and, read it and stuff. But, it's sort of... mainly when people contact me directly, I don't sort of go looking for comments, because the minute you do that, you find someone saying, I'm the least funny person they've ever heard.
Yeah.
Which might be true, but, you don't want to read that.
No, definitely not. So, besides AFL, what other sports do you follow? And have you chosen similar teams with the same luck as the Dees? Because, I'm picking you as a Bangladeshi cricket fan, or possibly a pre-2004 end of the Curse of the Bambino Red Sox fan.
Yeah, no, I've kind of balanced my sports portfolio with a variety of blue chips and constant failures. So I follow all the American sports, but most of them I've followed through travelling to the places or seeing them first, various ones. So I'm a 49ers fan back to the 80s.
When they were successful.
Where they were very successful, and that was complete luck because I was too young to really know what I was doing. They were just the first team I ever saw. They're a bit like Hawthorn, where we say, oh, yeah, but we had a tough few years in the middle. Although, actually, they've been useless ever since the 90s. I go for the Rangers and the Yankees in the hockey and the basketball and the baseball, because that was the first city I went to over there and went to those sort of games. And so the Yankees couldn't be more different than Melbourne, so they kind of balance out my, the awfulness. And then I also go for the Knicks because of that. I'm not into basketball as much, and they're basically Melbourne in NBA form, really. So it hasn't all worked out perfectly. And then I go for the Storm and the Victory in Melbourne, and so it's kind of sad to me that in my following the A-League, I've had more premierships or grand finals in the last 10 plus years than in my entire life of following the Demons. It's not lost on me.
But it's not the same feeling. If we get
but the first time I've been at the grand finals that Victory have won, and it's a great feeling. Like, I remember really enjoying it, but it wasn't. You don't have that. You don't have that. What is it? I wasn't crying.
Yeah.
which I would be if Melbourne won.
Yes.
I still watch the replay of us beating Hawthorn from last year, like it's the grand final. So
I say that to everyone I speak to. That was for me. That was a final for me.
I know that was like our. I mean, can you imagine what it would be like? I mean, that's the thing. Talking to Melbourne supporters, I say, can you imagine? And we all go, no, I can't actually imagine.
I have a friend who's a Bulldogs supporter. As I am a Melbourne supporter, he's a Bulldogs supporter, and I'm so jealous of him because what he went through last year is exactly what I hope to one day go through. Yeah.
Well, I know Danny McGinlay quite well, and the Bulldogs banner rider, and he's been he was telling me all about it because he was just really pumped about it, and I sort of had him on the podcast a few times before the weeks leading up to the grand final where he just couldn't believe it. So I've sort of seen someone up close go through it. Actually, that was one time I did a tweet that got people upset because Danny McGinlay, I'd seen him the day before the grand final, and he said to me, I said, how are you feeling? And he said, if we don't win, I'll probably be jumping off a bridge. Just that was his throwaway comment.
You can't say that these days.
Yeah, well, he just said that, so I then tweeted on the night of the grand final, great win by the Bulldogs. Only negative is Danny McGinlay won't throw himself off a bridge. And he knew, and I included him in the tweet, and he knew exactly what it meant, laughed. But I got about 20 people say, thinking I didn't know the backstory, so they all thought I just wanted Danny McGinlay to throw himself off the bridge if grand final had been lost. So
he got in trouble, didn't he, this week for tweeting something? It was on one of the film shows. I can't remember what it was now.
He had a banner suggestion, a fake banner that he didn't do that said something about lick those pussies or something for the Geelong.
That's right. Yep.
And footy, it was hilarious because Caroline Wilson and Hutchie on Footy Classified. Caro was saying how it was terrible, but they had Hutchie setting it up. And so there's Craig Hutchinson acting like he's all offended by it. Like
yes.
He's worked in footy all his life as a footy journalist, and he's acting like this has really upset him.
Yep, I saw that. Now, before we get on, we've spoken a little bit about your Melbourne connection and your Melbourne roots. We'll get onto that in a moment, but I just wanted to ask, you've got your blog, you're in the Herald Sun these days, you're on radio, the podcast, social media, you're all over the place. I presume now it's a full-time gig for you, or do you have a separate day job? Where are you sort of at with that, and what's next for Titus?
Well, it's a full-time gig now. I managed to go full-time, so I write for my own site, and I've got now supporters who, support me sort of in a model where they just, it's not, didn't want to have a paywall, and when I was with the Herald Sun, often it would go behind a paywall, so I've put it all back on my site and said, look, if you guys pay me an amount, I'll keep it beyond the paywall. So I have you can read it all for free, but a lot of people actually will support me and donate. So that that kind of helps. And then I also do Nova Breakfast every Monday with Sam Pang and Chrissy and Jonathan Brown. which has been good. I've been doing some stuff for Channel 7 of TV, some interviewing players, which has been good. That's been interesting. TV's a different thing. And then I've just written a book, which Penguin Random House will be publishing, which will come out in time for Christmas, which is a history of Australian sport, but in the Titus style. So that's sort of what I'm up to at the moment. And then I've done a bunch of live gigs. So I've started doing lots of live shows, and we'll be announcing a tour later in the year where we'll be doing Perth, Adelaide, Sydney, a few in Melbourne, and probably Hobart and Canberra as well. So I've done quite a few live sort of stand-up gigs recently. I did Comedy Store a couple of weeks ago in Sydney, and I've done down here. And then I did a couple of live gigs with Dane Swan the other day, the other month, me interviewing him.
I was going to ask you about that. How did that come about?
Well, I got asked, someone was putting together a thing with Dane Swan being interviewed, and they had someone in mind to interview him, and then said, do you want to interview him? It might be a bit more interesting if it's not just a traditional football journalist.
Yeah.
So I said, oh, yeah, I'll do that. And they said, you can ask him anything. He doesn't care. You can talk about the drugs. You can talk about Federation Square, you know, when he got in that brawl.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I said, okay, we'll do that. And then we did it. And I said so it was kind of funny because I didn't meet him until the night. So, and he actually was a really nice guy, like, you know, in my interactions with him, and was quite on stage, incredibly funny. Like, I was surprised how funny he was, like completely not how he sort of comes across like that a bit in the media, but actually backstage we were chatting. He had some really interesting views on footy and everything that were, you know, about how the game's run and all this sort of stuff. But the funniest bit of the night is I said to him, we were doing it at this club, and they brought it backstage to our dressing room. They brought a big silver bucket, like a huge bucket that fitted 30 Carlton drafts with ice in it as well. And so I said to him, you know, it'd be funny, because I went out and did 15 minutes of stand-up before introducing him. I said, oh, you know, it'd be funny if you come out carrying that like that's yours to drink. And so he did, and it got a big laugh. But then he proceeded to drink the prop. So he drank like 6 beers to my 1. He could drink. So it was an interesting night, me just making sure he was remembering what to talk about, keeping him going as I sat there looking very soft, and then ended up having some beers with him afterwards, which when I started this, I didn't kind of think I'd be having a beer one night with Dane Swan. It's sort of like, you know, it's sort of one of those things you must do in Melbourne, I guess.
Very surreal. So now to the important stuff. You know, which black cat did you stab with a broken mirror whilst walking under a ladder to become a Dees supporter?
Yeah, no, well, the worst thing for me is I didn't inherit it from from family or anything.
Didn't? Wow.
Don't tell me you chose it.
I chose this life, and so I grew up in a household where my family were my family, extended family, not immediate, were Collingwood supporters. So I dodged a bullet there. And we grew up barracking more for the VFA because of family connections and a few things, and had some people involved in that. So I was actually a Williamstown supporter growing up at the very early days, and was kind of almost it was a weird little group of people, or not weird group of people, but a group of people that kind of acted like the VFA was still the equal competitor to the VFL, if you know what I mean. It was, they really almost believed that. So we kind of were like not into it that much. And then I remember when I was quite young, going to the first game at the MCG, and it was just happened to be a Melbourne game, and going, wow, like, this is a bit bigger than a VFA game.
Yeah.
I was kind of remembering being, as a kid, surprised at how many people there were, and, you know, no one belted each other and things like that. And, you know, so it was Melbourne. So I just started barracking for them because I thought they would be, because they won that one first game, I thought they'd be amazing. And then by coincidence, while I was still quite young, I mentioned to a few people that I liked Melbourne, and the guy that lived behind our house, or, you know, 2 doors down, he was a in the house behind our house. He didn't just randomly live behind our house. It's sort of a creepy kind of troll-like person. No, it was a guy who lived behind us. He was a Melbourne supporter and was involved in one of the supporters club. Like, he was mad, went every week. And so did his son. So he said, well, you're welcome to come with me to any game you ever want. And so we did, and they were the sort to drive to Geelong and Waverley and, wherever. Not a lot of interstate. They did sometimes. But so I just...
So what years are we talking about?
This is back in the late 80s, early 90s.
Gotcha. Yep. So we're going
so
right
I was, and then, coincided with some of the players I can remember being captivated when Djakovic exploded.
Yeah.
For those brief moments, and it was Rodney Grinter and all these guys. Melbourne had some okay players for a while there. It wasn't all bad. We used to kid ourselves we might be going somewhere.
Oh,
and
I would give anything for that now.
Oh yeah, that was and I literally for about 10 years, all through my teens, went to every Melbourne Victorian game, no matter what. I was obsessed. And then that dropped off a bit, just still went obsessed and went a lot, but because of work and a few things, I just, couldn't go every single game like that. But I still went a lot through that. And then I ended up living in Richmond in my 20s, and I barracked and I was, of course, an MCC member, being a Melbourne supporter. And so I just went to games all the time then as well. So, yeah, it was sort of, that's how I just loved it from the moment. And, it still amazes me how upset I get at, things like the weekend where we really should know better. But, it still gets to me. I still care. And you sometimes wonder why you do.
Well, we'll have a chance to moan and groan about that in a moment.
Yeah.
We spoke earlier about Mark Neild and Dean Bailey. Which rebuild has been your favourite?
Well, easily the Neild one. I mean, bring everything from the naming the jacks, the captains, and just watching someone have a mental breakdown in real time was kind of amazing. If you didn't barrack if you didn't care, if it was just you were watching it, from afar, it was just really quite amazing. And it kind of felt like we kind of all knew early that it was going that way too. I felt like the fans made their mind up a lot quicker, and they were just so badly run, that club, for so long, weren't they? That was just,
Yep.
I mean, I kind of blame Neild a bit, but I kind of also look at, Cameron Schwab is kind of my number one, but, of all the people, sometimes when I'm tweeting, I think about certain people and I think, gee, I've been a bit harsh on them for a while. I better stop or it's going to seem like, I've got a vendetta against them or something. And, so if I'm making quite a few Travis Cloak jokes or something, that might be a case. But Cameron Schwab is one I'll never forgive and always take the cheap shot.
You're not the Lone Ranger there. He's
not
a particularly
Every
popular
true
person
Melbourne supporter that knows what's going on, I think, feels pretty much the same as me there. I don't think But
the shame of that is that if you'd ever spoken to Cameron, his heart was absolutely in the right place, and he was a very passionate, and still is a very passionate Melbourne man. It just went, it was all upside down, unfortunately, but it wasn't through ill will.
No, I didn't. I never felt like that, but it was just, it was. I mean, just, the stories, you could go on forever about them, but the way they ran it, the way they spoke, the things they focused on, I mean, it's almost a joke how, what is it with Melbourne, administrations and their love of a logo change?
Yeah, the logo, the blazers that they had made the players wear.
The blazers were the Sergio Paradise, who I do the podcast with, and is a Mad Demon supporter. He brings up the blazer every day we talk, and I have to tell him you need to tone down the blazer anger, but that's what it's like. But it's
they're probably a collector's item on eBay.
Yeah,
I must find
thousands.
Remember the stars on the back of the jumper?
Yes.
And the idea was they represented all our premierships and they were going to connect the circle eventually. Do you remember that?
I didn't know that they were going to connect the circle, but...
That was
had a missing star.
That was the thing, had a missing star, and the idea was that's where our next premiership would represent our next premiership. And, it didn't even last long enough for us to ever fill it. But I could just imagine knowing, because I've worked in a lot of corporations in previous life and stuff, and and everyone knows what work is like. Can you imagine how many hours they debated those stars?
Yeah.
And then they wonder why they weren't developing players and, because they were all sitting around as like a year 10 graphic designs course,
There was all that focus on the past as well, and nobody was paying any attention to the present or the future. Reliving the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, and and a lot of Demons fans weren't there for that. It means nothing to you that we won in, that we were dominant in the 50s. We all know that doesn't mean anything. It's like when Collingwood fans now pull out. They've had more recent ones, or Carlton fans, they say to me, well, we've won more premierships than anyone else. And you're like, seriously, that's what you're going to bring up after, the way you've been?
Yeah, it's pretty sad. So, as, being a satirist, do you think it's easier for you being a Dees fan than, say, being, a Hawks fan? And what I mean by that is does the tragedy of being a Dees fan, make you so bitter and jaded that it enables you to find the humour in the dark places where, say, if you followed Hawthorn and you've enjoyed the armchair ride to success, that acerbity might not have blossomed as it has?
Yeah, I kind of think... I'm sure it probably has. I think... you can't not have a dark... any of us that have got through the last, 10 years have had to develop a pretty good ability to find the gallows humour in it, which is why I often get along with Richmond supporters, because they're in the exact same boat, But I've always been kind of careful to try and be an equal opportunity offender across all the clubs, including my own. Because I kind of don't want to favour Melbourne either, and I do worry if we suddenly become good. It'll be a good problem to have, but, will that change things? But, you're kind of just poking fun at the ridiculousness of footy, so it's kind of a pretty rich vein to mine. I keep thinking, will I ever be short of jokes? And then, the AFL announces they're going to have a wild card weekend or something. They seriously give me so much, so I don't need to wait very long. But it does help. But the funny thing I find about being a Melbourne supporter is whenever I make a joke about any club, they say, I always get like a small percentage of people going, pretty rich coming from a Melbourne supporter, because that's all they can really say, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
But the best thing I get is whenever I make a joke, I get people who are often long-time fans, and they'll say, Titus, I really like your stuff and usually think you're very funny, but that tweet you did was way out of line. And I always look, and it's always about their club without fail. So,
naturally,
the joke will be a Carlton fan.
Yeah, they were always
every joke except when you bagged my team.
Yeah, they're always the one they've got in there, wearing their footy jumper in the avatar.
Yeah, that's right. So that's what I always get. So that's when I get people upset with me more, when it's about their team. But look, all our teams aren't perfect,
You talked about the AFL giving you endless material, to change the punching rules midweek this week. I read something from the head of the umpires, Peter Schwab, also earlier this week, about players standing the mark. Let me just read this quote to you, because it sounds like it's something from a Monty Python skit. There's a couple of things involved. One was in that part of the ground, which was the last third of the ground. The actual bloke on the mark doesn't have to go east-west. He can go off on a line tangent because of the way you line them up for goal. It's 2/3 east-west when you are defending, and when you come into your attacking third and you're lined up with the middle of the goal, you can go on that arc.
What does that mean?
What?
So it's clear as day to me.
Players are north-south oriented. and they
You know
struggle
what
to
that
go
is?
2/3 east-west in the defensive third. What are you going to do then?
I didn't bring a compass or a protractor to this conversation.
That's when someone just starts talking and they haven't really figured out what they're going to say, and so it's just emerging as you listen. I mean, but this is my favourite one, and that fits. I hadn't heard that one. That's terrific. That's great. My favourite one in recent years was when, remember, they brought in the shot clock, and then Mason, I think it was Mason Wood in a game, just ran the clock down by holding the ball because it was right up against 4-quarter time, and they said. And so everyone said, well, that's not in the spirit of the game. But you're like, well, but that's the rules. Like he's got whatever it is, 29 seconds or whatever to kick the ball. He doesn't have to kick the ball until the end. And so the AFL brought in a rule. Instead of getting rid of the stupid shot clock that no one ever wanted or asked for, and we've had 150 years of footy without it, they said, we're going to keep the shot clock and you've got 30 seconds to kick the ball, but you can be penalised if you don't look like intent enough that you're going to kick the ball in 30 seconds.
Yep.
So basically it becomes judging someone on their acting ability. Like you're allowed to take the full 30, but you have to spend that whole 30 seconds not just standing there doing nothing. You have to put on an act like you're going to kick the ball, but you still don't have to kick it any quicker. So that was their solution, and it's still the law of the land in the AFL. And this is, it's just bizarre. If you do wonder what they're smoking, that's what I often ask them when I talk to these people.
It's very similar to the deliberate out-of-bounds rule that they're starting to penalise players for a bad kick, that sprays off the side of the boot. So, where does it end?
Well, it's also about intent now, isn't it?
Yeah, well, how much of the rules now are about intent? It's just madness, it's that, these umpires need to sort of be psychologists or, psychics. So, yeah, it is. It's crazy. But they never mind a tinker, and then they never mind another tinker to fix the earlier tinker. So it's a jobs program, basically.
It's interesting. The umpires did lodge this week with the AFL an OH&S claim about bouncing the ball. We've had 120 years where umpires used to bounce it all day, not just in the centre bounce after a goal, and yet now they can't do it, 9 times a game. It's dangerous hazardous to their health. So.
What, bad for their back or something?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what they say.
The guy is just, there's so much nonsense around them. It's no wonder you've got a wealth of material to work with, I guess.
Well, between the AFL itself and then the footy media more generally, I'm never sure. I rarely look at it and go, oh, there's nothing to make fun of this week.
Yep. So, a question that many on this forum have asked, because your material does get posted up on Demonland, people sharing tweets or some of the pieces off your website, and then inevitably people respond saying that Titus is a Demons fan, and everyone wants to know, do you post on Demonland? And if you don't post on Demonland, do you read Demonland?
I don't post on it. I don't post on Big Footy either, or any of the sort of forums. That was more just out of the fact that through Twitter mainly.
You've got your other outlets already.
Well, it's just so all-consuming. That and Facebook, and then the blog was all-consuming. The times I ever dip into footy forums is sometimes when someone posts one of my things that comes, you can see where traffic comes from, and so suddenly you'll see you're getting a bunch from AFL Reddit, or it'll say Demonland or Hawks headquarters or something. And so every now and then I'll pop in and just see what people are saying, because you can sort of tell if they're going well or not. And sometimes I laugh because sometimes some people come up with jokes about it. They add something and I think, that's funnier than what I came up with. I'd pinch that if I didn't think I'd get caught. And then other times you go on, but then sometimes I try and avoid it because you go on to some, I can't remember on Demonland, but more on every now and then when I've wandered onto Big Footy to check something or look at something of why the traffic's coming, you get all these people going, this guy's the least funny guy, or he's jumped the shark or something. So you kind of, you kind of laugh but move on. So I don't trawl the forums for material or a lot, but every now and then I'll go on, and it's kind of funny because, I mean, reading when I have read Demonland, it's just like, the voices in my head playing out, really.
Yeah. Fair call.
So we might move on to discussing the game. We haven't discussed the games this last game. Where do we even start? Great binding.
Well, we could start with probably unfairly, but Thomas Bugg kicking 4 goals instead of 4 behinds. That would have made up the difference, and we could have won by 14 points instead of them winning by 14 points, I guess. But that's probably a bit unfair because I guess he at least got in a position where he was, he had 4 scoring shots, which was better than most of his colleagues for the day, I guess.
There were some players that didn't get those, take those marks or get those opportunities to kick a goal. So I don't think you can lay it squarely on someone's bad kicking. That's
were you at the game, Titus, on the weekend?
I was at the game. I was sitting up in the 4th level in the MCC watching. It was very quiet up there, actually. It wasn't that busy. But I kind of thought in the first quarter it looked a lot like, not having a ruckman doesn't help. And Goldstein, I thought, was helping them out a lot. I think with Melbourne this year, I don't know, I don't pretend to be a tactical genius. I don't, I'm very average on footy tactics. But, Melbourne seem to do that press-up thing, to put the pressure on so much. And it's like, if there's an overlap, instead of going with the player closer to the goal, they'll always push up, and it enables teams to just chip over the top or score quickly over the top of us. And against Adelaide, they just couldn't deal with the press. But it seems to either go really well or really badly, and North seemed to just have that ability to just get it over the top and beat that press every time we did it. It's very aggressive what Goodwin's trying to do, even lining up across the back line, and I can kind of see what he's doing, but it just, against a team that doesn't get rattled as much, I think it just doesn't always work.
Yeah, I think you're right what you said about Goldstein too. We won the clearances again, as we have the past few weeks with Peterson and Watts, but I think their clearances were better than ours. Yeah. And the times that Goldstein was able to get it to their on-ballers, they took it away and had clear and effective possession, whereas probably our clearances weren't as damaging as North's were.
Well, I think also that first quarter was when I noticed it, and then I think we did manage to negate him a bit and adjust, and that's when we started to get back in that game. But that first quarter, if you just kept that first quarter, what did they kick? 6 goals, was it in the first quarter?
6-7 to 2 something.
Yes. So you kept that to 4, it would have been a different game. You know what I mean? It was,
I think one of the moves that really cost us early on was putting Tom McDonald in the forward line.
Yeah, I agree.
It worked last week against Adelaide for a little bit, but I think it wasn't the right move.
I was surprised that Goodwin started that way, to be honest. I thought it... excuse me, I was annoyed when I saw that. I didn't like it, and I think it cost us early. I think the defence would have been stronger with T-Mac back there rather than playing up forward.
It's kind of a plan B move rather than plan A, and it's something you do when things aren't working, maybe change some things up, and it's not something you start at, but I think that cost us early on.
I don't like Hunt being up forward either, to be honest. It worked well when he was switched at half time against the Hawks, but Hunt's strength is his run, and there's nowhere left to run if he's playing up forward. So I'd much prefer to see him at half back and just leave him there or at the wing. but not at half forward.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think that's why you sort of got him in the side. So I just feel at the moment, I actually felt weirdly positive about the Demons at the moment, even with the loss on the weekend, because I think, you got Gawn out, you got Spencer out, so you got no ruck.
Yep.
You've got Hogan out, which is a huge loss. So you've got, the makings of a bunch of really, you got Brayshaw, who knows if he'll ever be back, unfortunately, but out. So, but when you look at it, it's the second youngest team roughly on average each week.
Yeah.
And our problem's gone from not being able to play AFL level to having bad quarters that are, you could argue we could have almost won every single game this year.
Yep.
I mean, when's the last time you've been able to say that about a Melbourne side? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's
we've started slowly in almost every game, other than probably the Adelaide game.
Yeah. And even that we overran them, So I kind of feel positive, the problems that Goodwin's got to solve and the team's got to solve in who we get in the next few years and natural progression of the players we've got. Our best, if we could... And then this is the thing I always think watching AFL that you've compared to other sports. I went to a Storm game recently. It goes for, 80 minutes with 10 minutes in the middle. So players have concentration spans. They don't, footy's like a war. You've got to concentrate. I mean, I hate those comparisons between the two, but it's a war of attrition, It's a long thing. And you've got to be able to concentrate for, a long period of time. And it's like, I think there's not a club in the AFL at the moment that's managing to concentrate for four quarters, which is why you're seeing the swings and the inconsistency. We've sort of lost the Geelong and the Hawthorns that could do that consistently. And it's almost like our team just hasn't learned to do that yet.
Well, as you said, they're young and inexperienced, and that comes with games and maturity, doesn't it? The ability to stay focused for longer and not have those drops in intensity and pressure that we're seeing.
Yeah, they're like taking your kids to the restaurant, they're not quite there yet.
Yeah, fair call. Very fair call. One positive, though, there are lots of positives. It's not all doom and gloom, as you say. But one thing we know for sure is it doesn't matter how far down we get, we can always get back into the contest. We've sort of seen it almost every week. We were down against St Kilda in round one. As you said, we were down against Adelaide by 28 points and had a 69-point turnaround. And what we were down by, what was the highest amount against North? 4 or 5 goals. So
26 points.
We're never out of it.
And then if we kick straight against Geelong,
yes,
that's one we should have won.
I mean, Richmond, we were 20 points up at three-quarter time. Probably should have beaten Freo.
So, the days of, being 5 goals down and that turning into a 15 or 20 goal loss are gone. And the players have obviously got a certain level of self-belief that it doesn't matter if they're 5 or 6 goals down. They have the faith to be able to pick it back. But it'll be a lot better not to go into deficit at the start, wouldn't it? And not have to play catch-up footy all the time, which is what we seem to be doing at the moment.
Oh, we wouldn't know ourselves. Can you imagine if we became a competent football team?
Yeah.
I suppose Sorry, Andy, you were going to say?
No, I was just going to read out our telephone numbers. I've been remiss tonight. If you do want to give us a call, 03 9016 3666, or you can Skype us on Demonland 31. Go ahead.
I thought it was one of those games where just the ball didn't bounce our way a little bit too. We spoke earlier that the umpires were against us. And just the little things here and there just didn't sort of seem to go our way. But there were a few good things. Mitch Hannon's form, probably the best game that he's played, kicked 3 goals, took some nice marks and was lively across half forward.
Early on I was actually thinking... at one point, I'm not sure what he did, but I thought, all right, Mitch, it's time for you to go back to the twos. And then he really proved me wrong for the rest of the game and was probably one of our better players and earned himself a nomination in the AFL Team of the Week.
Yeah, which is not a bad result in what, your third or fourth game. So Sam Frost's form continues, I guess, a little bit, doesn't it? He makes mistakes, but he's going pretty well, Frosty, isn't he?
Well, I'll tell you who else is going really well is Michael Hibbert, possibly the best pickup we've had in a couple of years in the off-season.
He
hasn't put a foot wrong, has he?
Yeah, he's got.
He has been the pickup of the. He's sort of the. It sort of cancels out. It sort of cancels out our Jake Melksham issues. So, 50% from Essendon's not bad.
Yeah.
I've got a feeling we're going to see the milkshake back this week. Probably. Will probably replace Christian Salem, won't he? I think he had a couple of decent games in the twos.
But you look at we're replacing Salem's kicking skills with Jake Melksham.
Yeah.
Yep.
Say
no more.
It's like going from a Ferrari to a broken down Corolla.
That it is. In terms of other changes come this week, there's a number of boys at Casey that would probably be thinking, when are they going to get their chance, considering we've had a lot of injury suspensions. You got Neil Bullen, you got Stretch has been he's been brought into the team a few times to be the holdover player. He must be thinking, how's he going to get a game?
Yeah, James Harms would probably be the other one, and I think Ben Kennedy had a decent game on the weekend, so he might be in that mix too. Because one player who's copped a lot of grief on Demonland this week, and rightly so, because he had a bit of a stinker on the weekend, was Dean Kent, and he just he's off the boil at the moment. That's for sure.
Another player.
Yeah, it's hard to know who you put in though. That's the thing. Like they tried Kennedy Harris for a while, and that didn't work.
Yeah, it did that.
Nope.
That was a failure. Another player who I think would be under the pump as well is Dom Tyson. I think his form this year has been well below par of what's expected of him, and possibly needs to go back to the twos.
Yeah, Tyson's an interesting one. There was a comment on Demonland today, I think by Pro D, which I agreed with, which is Tyson hasn't really improved since his debut year, has he? Which I think was 2014. He just, he's played, I think he's played 80 odd games now, and he hasn't gotten better. We sort of see some good form from him, but it's not consistent. He doesn't really put four quarters together. He's turning the ball over a lot. And one thing he's not doing, which he did do in his first year, is kick goals. I think he's only kicked one for the year. So, we need more from Tyson. There's no doubt about that. Whether he gets dropped, I'm not sure. We miss Angus Brayshaw, don't we? It's the news today, if you haven't caught up, or the news this week, Brayshaw will be on the sidelines indefinitely, taking a rest, give his noggin a rest. So, real shame for a young kid who's looked in his first year like he was going to be a superstar, I thought.
I agree. I can't see how he can possibly come back, and I say that as a big fan of his, and I hope he can. Like, I'd love to be proven wrong. But the recent concussion he got, did you guys see the footage of that playing for Casey?
It didn't look like much, did it?
It wasn't even a full blow to the head, Like, there's obviously deeper issues there. I mean, you'd be surprised to learn that I'm the farthest thing away from a brain surgeon, but it just seemed like a very much an innocuous thing, and, it's starting to get scary. Like, as much as the selfish part of me would love him to come back and risk it because he's so talented and we need him, the other part of me looks at it and goes, gee, would you, when's one going to happen and he doesn't wake up or he has the long-term issues? I mean, it's a real issue. It's a real problem that the club has.
Yeah, it's hard to. I mean, we're not, as you said, we're not neurologists, and we don't have his medical records, so it's a bit hard to assess. But I just wonder. It seems we're getting this message that the club isn't worried about his health, sort of long term, and that his parents, who are obviously in on the news, are also not concerned. And there was sort of a suggestion I've seen a couple of times. I don't know whether it's true or not, that the main reason he's sitting out is because it's his confidence. He just can't attack the ball in the way that he's meant to. In the few knocks that he's had have shaken him up, and he just that it might be a mental thing rather than a physical thing at the moment. So I guess
that hard to believe. I find that hard to believe a bit though when he's had 5 concussions or whatever it is. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to be a doctor to know that can't be great.
No, but I don't know whether it's 5 concussions, because there's been a number of head knocks, however many it is, but I don't know whether all of them have necessarily been concussions. I think there's like a distinction there.
The only comparison I can think
then again, I'm a failed art student, so, I should put my qualifications out there on the line so everyone knows.
The only comparison I can think of in sport, I'm sure there's some in boxing, but that's got a good story to it, is Sidney Crosby for the Pittsburgh Penguins, who has had a heap of issues with concussion and actually missed long periods of time not playing. He's the best player in the NHL, but has managed to get back after long layoffs that has sort of seen him get right. And that just makes you wonder, should they have probably given him more enforced leave earlier or something? I don't know if that's true, but there are cases where if I hope it is true that he can come back and it's not a long-term problem.
Yeah, fingers and toes crossed on that one. Sam Wiedemann is struggling at the moment. He hasn't had a great year, but on the weekend he couldn't even do the one job that we needed him to do, which is bring the ball to ground, because he actually couldn't get near the ball in the air. He seemed to be just metres away from it. I think part of that's just a size issue, that he's too easily knocked out of the contest, particularly up against the bigger-bodied North defenders. But it doesn't look like they can replace him at the moment. Who would you bring in if Sam was to go back to the twos, which is what some people are saying he should do?
Well, we don't really have the cattle at the moment or the luxury to do that, because Tim Smith, who would probably be the next bigger body guy, is not back yet, or he's on the cusp of returning. There's no one else that can come in for him. I mean, Jesse's not there. We need Watsy and Peterson in the ruck. Unfortunately, he's not ready for it, but he's, we don't have the luxury to develop him at the moment in the twos.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Yeah. I mean, he's a guy that shouldn't probably play AFL for 2 more years, know, and I don't, but just to get for that position, he's not like a Hogan that came in already a beast.
Yeah.
And I do feel for him, because I feel like he's going to just cop 2 years of probably having to play more seniors than he should, and everyone will knock him because he just physically can't do it.
I think he'll be better once Jesse's back and Max is back, and then he's got Watts and Hogan taking the 2 best defenders, and then he's got the 3rd best. So I think he might go all right.
I wouldn't have him in the team when they're back. I would have him developing in the twos. I'd have Peterson in the team before him. I think Peterson's proven he can kick goals, can take marks up forward. He's a bigger body. I'll keep Peterson in the team and use him as the pinch ruckman for the last 5 minutes of the quarter to relieve Maxi.
Yeah, look, it's going to be interesting when everyone's back to see how good he goes in terms of the ruck and the forward setup, and presuming that Peters keeps playing well, which he's certainly done, or played to the best of his abilities, whether he can keep his spot in the side. Rafiki's asked in the chat room how Liam Hewlett's been going at Casey. He's not really a forward option anymore, is he? I think they've been playing him in defence this year for the most part.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with that. We might have to speak to Whispering Jack about that at another time.
I mean, he was certainly playing forward last year, but I've got a feeling they've been trying him in the back line this year, so I don't think he's a replacement for Sam Wiedemann if that's what's sort of being talked about. Somebody else Earl Hood has just suggested maybe Mitch King, but he's only 4 games back from a reconstruction and he's young himself, so I can't see King getting a game at this stage. And Nasher, just lastly from the chat room, says that Hewlett played forward again this week and apparently went okay. So, certainly not bashing the door down at this stage. And I wouldn't have thought likely to come into the ones to replace Wiedemann.
Yeah, I think we're just going to have to ride it out until our bigger men are back. And this is a good time to have a look at our injury list at the moment. Melbourne released this week's injury list, and you never sort of can tell how accurate it is. Because the last few weeks, Aaron Vandenberg has been 6 to 8 weeks, and he's still 6 to 8 weeks. But they did come out and say that Vanders is not travelling too well at the moment, and is at least still 8 weeks away. His heel is not healing.
Can't take a trick, can he? I mean, that's 2 years in a row now where, it's just hard to see him getting back this year now, basically, or certainly not in the ones, the way it's going. So, absolute bad luck for Vanders at this stage. Just, it's all going against him. We could use him too, up forward at the moment.
Yeah, a big body who could take a mark,
Yep.
sort of a smaller forward, but still a big body. I think on the positive side, we've got Jake Spencer, they're saying 2 to 3 weeks away. And Maxi, they've still got listed as 4 to 6 weeks away.
But Max has said something else, hasn't he, on radio?
Yeah, he put his hand up for Collingwood or at least the Bulldog, or maybe the Bulldogs the week after.
Yep, the week after, yeah.
That's 4 weeks away, so we'll see. Hopefully we can sort of, after the break, get a few of these players back because, we need them.
Does Kent get another chance this week, or will we see one of Harms, Nibbler, Stretch or Kennedy come in? Titus, what do you reckon?
I'm inclined to give him
one more
go. I'm inclined to give him one more go. I mean, he wasn't great, but I mean, it's not like we're flush with other options, and see how he goes. Hopefully lifts. This is the problem we've got at the moment. It's just, the injuries we've had, so specific around rucks especially. It's been pretty... It's rare that you can say injury is completely a legitimate excuse, but it has structurally just... And Jesse being out too. It's like anyone over sort of 6'3" is injured.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
I'm inclined to give Kent another go, but I mean... We said the week before on the podcast that he didn't have a fantastic game against Adelaide, but he still kicked 2 goals, and he did his job as a small forward. If I've got a small forward kicking 2 goals every week, I'm happy with that. So he didn't do it this week, so I don't know, maybe one more week, and if he doesn't, then he might have an extended break in the twos.
Yeah, look, part of the issue I think this week, which we mentioned before. And look, Jeffy Garlett was also quiet, was that the ball didn't really come to ground in the forward line because, Wiedemann and others couldn't make the contest and Jack Watts didn't have a particularly good game either.
Yeah.
The North backs were generally able to mark and then clear the ball, so there probably weren't the same number of opportunities for Kent and Garlett this week that there have been in weeks gone by.
Yeah.
I thought, Jack Watts had a very poor game and his body language sometimes is well, not body language, but the way he sort of holds his body when he's going for a mark is just, it leaves me shaking my head sometimes. I don't know whether others are of the same opinion, but he looks like Gumby sometimes when he's going for a mark. It's just all floppy jalopy, basically.
He's never had great body language. I mean, that was part of always the problem with Jack, is he never looks like a Viney that's going to go through a brick wall. So Viney, even if he doesn't do well, which he usually does do well, at least the effort looks like it's there. And Jack's just always, I think, suffered a bit from just he doesn't look like that. And so if it doesn't go well for him, he cops it for both ways, if you know what I mean.
Yep. No doubt about that.
All right, so looking forward to this week, playing in Alice Springs. This is part of our giving away, selling our home games. And, well, at the moment, the MCG, well, maybe we can talk about that. MCG isn't our home ground
Not a happy
anymore.
hunting ground.
Not at all. I used to love going to the G. We sort of play our best football there. But this year, it's sort of give me Etihad Stadium any day. I never thought I'd say that.
Yeah, that's right. We're sort of going all right anywhere else other than at the home. Donelska has just posted in the chat room that Jack is the Mark Waugh of the MFC. Looks laconic, sublimely skilled. Can I just clear up a misconception? And this is the most commonly misused word in football. Laconic does not mean effortless, and you don't use laconic to describe how Gary Lyon used to float around sort of skillfully without any effort. Laconic actually means of few words. So it's someone who's got very little to say. So when you say that a player looks laconic, it means that they don't say a lot. So you see that everywhere, and you used to see it all the time. Gary Lyon is so laconic, and it's anyway. There's my little language rant for the evening.
There you go.
Is that your arts degree coming to the fore?
Yes. It's about the only thing I know. So Donelska's apologised and says I stand corrected. So all good. We can move on.
So there you are accusing Donelska of you're accusing the umpires of their own interpretation. Perhaps he meant that Jack Viney was a few words.
Yeah, it's possible. Absolutely. I don't know what the poster's intent was. So if they're posting on an east-west axis in their defensive third, I think they're on safe ground, and we can award a free kick.
So I think we've got to hope that the Alice Springs turf is a happy hunting ground for us. I'm a little bit worried about the Gold Coast. Maybe this is just my Melbourne Football Club supporters syndrome coming through, because I've said I think we have the ability to be able to beat any team in the league at the moment, but on the flip side, we have the ability to lose to any of the teams. So I'm a bit worried about the Gold Coast. I'm worried about Ablett. I'm worried about Lynch. Forwards seem to have their best games against us.
I'm very worried about Lynch, because I just think the way the ball comes into forward lines against us and our lack of probably a second big defender means we're in probably real trouble.
Well, this is why it was so strange that they started McDonald forward on the weekend. I thought we sort of needed as many tools as we could back there. So, yeah.
Well, if you look how Ben Brown stitched us up, what's Tom Lynch going to do to us? Because Tom Lynch is about 5 times better than Ben Brown.
Exactly. Speaking about another big backman, there's been talk this week about... who's the guy that we...
Stephen May.
Yes.
Yep.
Stephen May.
Yeah, I mean, are we going to look at that? I think we have to.
Well, I think Gary Lyon was the one that floated that, and it's I've heard that May's happy up on the Gold Coast and likes it there and is going to probably stay. But it reminds me of these things where, you know, people just float in the media. We should go and get this really good player. Like, of course we're going to try, I guess, but, you know, I don't think he's necessarily going to want to come and move. There's talk of Nathan Jones's brother, though, from the Swans.
Yeah.
He's not. He's more a run and carry off the back line, but we're in the hunt apparently for him. So
we talked about this, I think, Grapeviney. We talked about it earlier on in the year on the podcast, and at the time I sort of said, "Nah, I'm not really interested." But since we've talked about that, I've noticed him a lot more. And I don't know if I've noticed him a lot more because we talked about it or because he's actually performing a lot better. But I'm starting to change my tune about him. I like him, but still a long way off.
He's been good this year, so I'm all for as much of the Jones family as we can get. I'm quite happy about that.
Well, we like sort of getting the set of brothers. We've done that for years and years.
Yep, that's true. It's funny, we had the classic Demonland suggestion this week in regards to Stephen May. Somebody was paying out on Oscar McDonald and saying he's not worth it and, you know, we should get rid of him and offer him up as trade bait in return for May, which is this sort of classic proposition that we can offer up a player who we decide is a dud and get someone good in return, not expecting that the opposition club will be wise to what we're up to. So, one of those rainbow trades.
We tried to pass off Jack Trengo to Richmond. Remember that one?
And we almost got away with it too if it wasn't for that meddling doctor.
That's when I started to get worried. We were either totally trying to cheat them, or our medical staff really need to go to medical school. They must have the same arts degrees we all do.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, look, Zach Jones is an interesting one because his form's good. I don't know whether he's exactly what we need, but he's playing good footy at the moment.
Yeah,
giving him a lot of drive off half back.
Is he more? Yeah, he's more half back than midfield. But I think we're all right off the half back and in the midfield. I think we've got deficiencies in other areas. But, you know, I'm always happy.
Yeah, I don't see him as a priority. No. But he's not a bad player at all.
But if we can give up someone that we think's a dud, then I'm all for it.
And what's better, we can package them all together, all the NQRs in one big bundle. So that's the way to do it, I think.
We can always go back to Neil's Moneyball way. Well, I don't think we gave that enough of a try, really.
But wasn't Peterson, was he part of the Moneyball strategy?
I think
Peterson probably. Well, Peterson was for Gisberts. They got Jordan Gisberts out of Peterson, I think, wasn't it? Wasn't it a straight swap?
Well, I think we did better on that transaction.
Yes, hasn't really been heard of since Jordan Gisberts.
No, I haven't heard from him since that first game that he played. That we thought he was going to win a Brownlow.
Yep. But yeah, Moneyball. Well, that brought in champions like Gillies. And
from Geelong,
and those types. So
and Shannon Burns as well.
Shannon Burns, yes.
And remember, Shannon Burns kicked 6 goals in a intra-club match, and it got written up in the media like, "What a great signing that he kicked 6 goals in an intra-club match." And I'm like, the problem is we have to play other teams, but apart from that, he was a very good pickup.
All that tells me
against Melbourne, he was very good.
Well, that's exactly right. All that tells me is that whoever was playing on him is really not good. So.
Yeah, it was actually they read the sign wrong there. It should have been the other way.
Extraordinary times they were, that's for sure. Extraordinary times.
Well, this is why when I look at Clayton Oliver, I just feel like, you know, we might have a genuine, you know, star of, like, you know, top 2-3 player in the league in, you know, the next few years, if not already. And it just does my head. I just can't believe it. I can't get my head around it. How has this happened?
Did he get? He was tagged this week, wasn't he? Quite heavily.
Yeah, he still kicked that goal, and he still, did a lot of good things. Yeah. So, yeah,
it's amazing because people are sort of saying he had a poor game, and it certainly wasn't at the level that he's had up until now. But he was. They were a lot poorer than Clayton Oliver on the day. He was probably just okay rather than great, which is what he's sort of been for most of the year. So one quiet day we can forgive.
I wish I could play that badly.
Yeah,
that was a bad game. I'd be happy with all our players playing as badly as him.
Yep. I think he's going to be a genuine superstar. So, Rafiki saying he was a bit off. His handballing was sloppy. But he's not the Lone Ranger there. Nathan Jones seems to have this sort of patch in every game where for 15, 20 minutes, every time he touches the ball, it goes directly to the opposition. And Jordan Lewis does the same thing, doesn't he? We've got senior guys turning the ball over under sort of next to no pressure. And it hurts, doesn't it?
Oh, it's killing us. I mean, we beat ourselves every week. That's the one weird thing this year. Like in other years, we just get smashed by an opposition that was so far above us it wasn't funny. And if we can fix some of our own problems, the problems lie within our team this time, not the talent's there, the ability. I think even the desire's there. Sometimes I feel they just need to actually calm down a bit with the disposals and put a bit and keep that pressure up though on the defensive level that they sometimes drop off.
Yeah, there's no doubt we look rushed on occasions when we probably have more time to stop and assess the situation rather than just sort of dishing off those sort of quick handballs. So again, I guess that's sort of inexperience and youth coming through, but you expect guys like Jones and Lewis and Vince to not make as many of those mistakes because they're meant to be senior players. So, it's a bit of a shame.
Well, we'll hope that they can turn around that form going into this week. So, is there anything else, Grapevine, you want to discuss before we wrap it all up?
No, I think we've given it a good shake tonight. We've been very lucky to have our guest on, and he's been a good sport hanging around for the duration of the show. So
right. It's been fun, guys. It's fun to be able to drill down with other people, to the same level of intensity on my team that you don't always get to do. When I do it to other people who don't barrack for Melbourne, they start to zone out after about 2 minutes.
Yeah, I find that as well, particularly when I'm talking to my wife and she really does not care one iota of what I've got to say about anything related to football.
There's always a home for you on Demonland, Titus. If you need to talk about Alex Neil-Bullen at 2:30 in the morning, there's a place for you to go and mingle with like-minded souls.
Well, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Not a problem. Now, do you remember, I don't know, it all depends on whether you started following the Dees. It depends when you started following the Dees, but do you recognise, and I'll play it now, our theme music? Do you remember this song?
I remember it from, I think I have seen it before, but I don't know if I remember from the time or from YouTube. Okay.
It was in, I think, 88 or 89. They produced some video where the players are sort of, doing karaoke to this song, and it's quite funny if you look it up on YouTube. But we've taken it as our theme for this show.
If you want a good YouTube clip, Google Daryl Summers at the 1987 Grand Final. He sings Waltzing Matilda in a white cotton suit with the sleeves rolled up.
Very good.
As as it sounds.
As you were saying that, I'm looking it up right now. Yes, I think I even remember that. I'll have to watch.
I think
that
we're all
afterwards.
still crying from the week before, where we probably didn't notice at the time.
Fantastic. Well, Titus, I really want to thank you for joining us tonight. It is much appreciated taking time out of your busy schedule to chew the fat with us. So thank you very much. Much appreciated.
No problem, guys. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. So I just want to once again thank you to Titus O'Reily. Really appreciate him coming on, and that was great, great Viney. So
Yep, just another demon tragic.
Yep.
Like the rest of us. So really good chat, and a lovely guy too.
yeah, it was great. And there's the answer. He answered that question that we all wanted to know. That does he post on Demonland? And well, apparently not.
No, but we haven't heard from Destroy All tonight.
Yes.
And he is usually about in the chat room, so the mystery remains a little bit unsolved.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we'll move on, and we set our sights to Alice Springs this week, and hopefully when we're back next week, we've got something good to talk about. I don't like these It's almost like our finals appearances in the 2000s, the 1 week on, 1 week off, 1 year on, 1 year off.
People need to get off this idea that every win is a line in the sand game, and that every loss is like proof of a false dawn. We turned the corner and had the line in the sand, I don't know, 2 years ago at Geelong maybe, and forget the false dawn. This is we are properly rising, and the losses that we're having are not, not proof that things are going off the rails, not by any stretch of the imagination. So people should stop, riding this crazy emotional roller coaster when it's all trending upwards.
Yeah.
Keep the faith.
Yeah, well, look. I've had to re-loop the song again, but while we're on it, we may as well talk about it. Yeah, look, we're not getting pumped every week. I mean, that's got to be a positive from the last 10 years. We're in games, we're thereabouts. It's going to eventually it'll click, and we will win those games. So we do have to keep the faith. Sure, they're winnable games, but we'll get there. And I mean, the guy who wrote the thread the other week, are we a genuine contender for the flags? Probably got a bit of eggs on his face. I think he went a bit too early with that one, but the wins will come.
And apart from the odd lapse, I'm loving watching us this year.
It's exciting.
We're exciting when we're on,
coming back, it would have been nice if we had gotten our nose in front, but, we got to within basically level. Third quarter was disappointing, but we still came back and almost, pipped them again. Yep. It's exciting. And, all right, I want to win these games, and eventually it'll happen. But, we haven't seen this type of football where we've, thought we'd been out of it and come back. We haven't seen this in a long time. It's a lot to be excited about, and it'll come.
Yep, agreed, 100%.
Yeah. All right, well,
let's leave it on that note.
Let's leave it on that note, exactly. All right, thank you, Grave Viney, for joining me once again, and thank you, everyone, for listening. Join us each week. If you're listening to the replay of this, join us live. We have a chat room at demonland.com/podcast. Come chat with us, listen to us live, and we'll be here every week, Wednesday, 8:30 p.m. And thank you.
Go Dees.
Go Dees.